So now we're going to look at what the results are of having a false worldview with particular emphasis on what is ultimate and what is ultimate reality, that is what exists. So for example, if you are an atheist or a physicalist, atheistic physicalist or a pantheist, where really everything's the same, there really is no basis, and this is very important, for a hierarchy of either beings or a hierarchy of value for things. Because really, if everything is the same thing, you can't have a good, better, and best. You can't have anything that's really normative in the sense of, well, there's ought. There's only is if everything is the same thing. If you are God, then you don't make mistakes. You are God. Pantheism is a complete is, okay? In atheistic physicalism, if you have a bunch of hard deterministic protons, neutrons, and electrons that accidentally clump together, again, unintentionally bumping into each other, that's just a whole bunch of is, okay, not an ought. This is just the way things are bumping into each other and producing unintentional effects. So that's why it's important that we think about the concepts of ontology or being, okay, substances with properties in their existence, and then we think about value, which is philosophically we call that axiology. The fact is that pantheism is a worldview and atheistic physicalism as a worldview, if followed consistently, lead to what's called an ontological and an axiological egalitarianism. Egalitarianism, that everything is leveled off and that there's no hierarchy. Now, if you think about this, if there's no hierarchy of being or value, okay, we get to the problem of, all right, again, how do you measure, for example, what's more important than another thing? For example, if you're going to save a tree or a human baby, how do you make the decision? Okay, there with atheism, I mean, I'm not sure you have how there is even such a thing as value, much as having a hierarchy of normative values. And at that point, you just got hard determinism and completely arbitrary random thing. Save the baby or the tree, it doesn't matter. You've got Bohemian Rhapsody, right? Nothing really matters. So if you're a true atheist, you have to go to atheistic existentialism and really go say nothing really matters and be depressed about it, because it's just a bunch of dust in the wind. Same thing with pantheism. Pantheism ultimately can lead to the ultimate arrogance where it doesn't matter, I'm God, so everything I do is right. Okay, why? So again, atheistic physicalism, trees, babies, and everything are equally valuable. In pantheism, a tree and a human baby are equally valuable. So this is the problem with these lack of hierarchies when you think about making ethical decisions about what to value or how to put a value on merit for goodness, for praise, or a value on demerit for harm that's caused, to think about what retributive justice would be. What would be a penalty for causing a particular harm if everything is the same? How do you even claim that there's a harm? If you're a pantheist and everything is divine, then what's the harm done if God is acting? If I'm acting and I'm divine, how can I say that that's harmful? Because I'm God. If you're an atheistic physicalist, and this is, quote, you acting, well, that's just hard, chaotic, teleological determinism in place. How can you really say it's right and wrong in any meaningful, grounded sense? And so practically what you end up with are these, again, decisions, for example, functional personhood, for example, becomes a foundation for ethics. So, for example, in certain modern ethical systems for atheists, they might talk about, ethical dilemma. You've got a seeing-eyed dog that's drowning and a newborn human baby. And then, so what do you do with this? And then, see, the functionalist says, well, you save the seeing-eyed dog because that's more functionally a person than the newborn baby. Why? Because it's demonstrating more functions. Now, how you ground that in any hierarchy is not known, but that usually results in that type of thing because we don't have essences with a hierarchy with properties in them. But when you start saying that, and this will be important for those of you interested in thinking about a theology of creation stewardship, okay? And I'll give you this. Not only does, when you think about the concept of animal rights, okay, well, the fact is, yes, God's creation is important, but the only way we have an idea of how much to value any particular thing is because we know the value and the goodness and the glory of the perfect being, God. And we have a hierarchy of being by which the things that are the most like God are the greatest in value and the greatest kinds of beings. The things that are the least like God, right, are the things that are the least in being and value. And so when you think about this hierarchy of being and value with God, we know who God is. I mean, we have knowledge of God from creation and natural theology, and we have the law written on our hearts. So the fact is, we actually have an intuitive view of understanding of these things. You have to suppress the truth and unrighteousness, to get to anything like ontological and axiological egalitarianism. But see, this is natural to think about saving the human baby before we save the seeing eye dog. You have to be argued out of that by bad philosophy or bad religion to get to that point. All that to say is, when you get to the point of having this hierarchy, the fact that we can say that dogs, cats, gorillas, have value is because the fact that we can make a case that they think, they're self-aware. So a dog is greater in value than a rock. Okay? Why? Because the greatest type of being is a personal, righteous, holy being that can think, that can choose, and do these kinds of things. Now I'll do more on personhood later on when we get to anthropology, theology, and some of these other categories. But ultimately, it's easy for us to say, again, a dog is more valuable than a rock, and so forth. So if you want to save the rock or the dog, we save the dog. And we can go up this ontological and axiological scale. The problem comes now is that, see, when we think about now how this works in a Christian worldview versus a pantheistic or atheistic worldview, we start thinking about creation stewardship, or what people might call environmentalism. God created and designed the universe and the earth for us, for human beings to have dominion over it. But it's important to understand, too, that made in the image of God, we have dominion, but we're also stewards of the creation to use it properly. So I highly recommend my good friends at the Cornwall Alliance for the Stewardship of Creation. I'm on their advisory board. Dr. Cal Beisner does a great job on Christian worldview and creation stewardship issues. So I encourage you to look them up on this. But all that to say is that when atheists and pantheists now start applying the idea of a human being and a tree or other animals being equally valuable, see, they have to go to some, functional analysis to make a decision on who wins in a conflict. So we start thinking about, we need to, for example, grow food to feed human beings. But then now there's a conflict because, so now you're plowing fields and you're killing some subspecies of kangaroo rat. Well, now you can't, farm these 20,000 acres of farmland because somehow you're killing this subspecies of rat that somehow is entitled to the same right to life as a human being. Okay? And by the way, this is why when you see inflation, people can't afford to buy food. Because a lot of it has to do with the displacement of farmland. It has to do, in California, it has to do with water rights. We have our problem with the federal law, with the environmental protection laws that say the Delta smelt issue. In Northern California, we had this non-native species that was being killed off in the pumps for the California aqueduct. So again, they're shutting off the aqueduct. The farmers in the, our Central Valley, who are, again, breadbasket of the West, weren't able to grow as many crops. The land's fallow. They're not getting enough water. What happens? Prices skyrocket. Okay. Also, for housing, and I say this because this is real. When you get people who are atheistic or pantheistic, you're either saving Mother Earth because trees and rocks and rats are just as valuable as human beings. Yeah, or what you've got are atheists saying, you've probably heard this, is that we are living in the luckiest accident in the universe, that everything accidentally came together just right to support human life. So this is why they're looking at, well, any minor change might set off this butterfly effect, which could ruin, right, this lucky accident that we have. See, instead of a worldview that has a designer God who knows that there's going to be sin, know that we're going to do things wrong, we can't ruin God's creation. He built into it ways to fix it, and God, in fact, does miracles. That's not to say that we're not supposed to be stewards of the environment, but that's different from the idea that the earth is fragile, okay? It's not fragile. It's designed by an omniscient and all-wise God, okay, to make it the way it's supposed to be. But you can see how that worldview difference would result in how we're growing crops, what lands we allot, for building houses. I'll tell you, here in Southern California right now, you've got housing crises that go on because you've got all sorts of set-asides for environmental rules and everything else. So there's not as many houses, too many people. Average house in Southern California is about $750,000 now. And I'll tell you, man, you have young people trying to buy a house these days. They get out, get their college degrees, have their 150, 200 grand in student loan debt. And now all of a sudden you're trying to come up with 200 grand down to put together on a cracker box house, okay? That is not good for human flourishing, okay? So this is why it's important that we think about this egalitarianism that results. We put human beings first on the hierarchy, okay? And then we go downward from that. And again, we treat animals the way God wants us to treat them. We look at important scriptures like, don't muzzle the ox while he's threshing. Okay, well, yeah, we don't torture animals for fun. Fact is, God says we can use them for God's appropriate ways. We use the earth for God's appropriate ways, but human beings come first. But there are consequences for ontological and axiological egalitarianism, inflationism, poverty, you name it. Talk about one of the ultimate justice issues is to have freedom and not only the fairness, and protection from evil, but economic availability for people as well. And unfortunately, these other worldviews preclude that. So for that, what we'll do now is take a quick break, and we'll pick up on next time on the application of these worldviews real quickly with morality and humanness and knowledge. So we'll take a quick break.